Shabbat Shalom. When I arrived in Detroit in 1971, I was the first young rabbi to work in our Reform temples or conservative synagogues. The philosophy prior to my arrival was to hire what was referred to as a seasoned rabbi, clergy that had survived another congregation, often working as an assistant to a senior rabbi or leading a smaller congregation. Rabbi Leon Fromm, our founder, had been salted and peppered at Temple Bethel. Rabbi M. Robert Syme had been properly basted and seasoned at a smaller congregation before coming to work with Rabbi Fromm at Temple Israel. Because I was the only young rabbi in the community, I found myself called to participate and lead very interesting programs. For over 2 years, on WCAR radio, I was the rabbinic voice of Reflections in Sound. This radio program that I developed played the latest rock and roll music. I was the disc jockey. I controlled the board, and I chose all of the music. My main role, bringing Jewish commentary to rock music. Now, this connection to music on a rock station brought me many invitations to public and parochial schools. I always wondered who was up early enough in the morning. This was not a 12 o'clock in the afternoon program. This was like at 8 o'clock on the way to church for many. But I was heard. And so I recall 2 high school invitations that stand out. The first, when I was invited to speak at a school on the East Side. The students had never met a rabbi and perhaps had never met a Jew. The teachers ordered bagels for the entire school. This was before there were bagel stores on every corner. The bagel then was a uniquely Jewish sandwich. The students, I could tell, were disappointed when I arrived. They were expecting a rabbi that looked like all of the art from the Middle Ages that they had studied. I was a shock. They were an incredible audience. The reason, the teachers had spent weeks preparing them to ask excellent questions. I had long hair and looked like the average 26-year-old. Okay, I was cuter than the average 20. It was perplexing to them. How in the world could I be a rabbi? I was an answer to questions that they had not thought to ask. I recall one specific question from a Catholic young man who could not understand how I could be married and have children. He had never before in his life met a rabbi, but he never in his world met a minister who was part of a family structure. My second visit that I recall to a high school came when I received a call from the drama director. They were rehearsing Fiddler on the Roof. They asked me to visit and discuss the history of the musical and help them with a chuppah. So I brought with myself a chuppah, the 4 poles, and a talit that I had used often at weddings. They wanted to know and to see really a ketubah. What was this kind of document that was used at weddings? They wanted to understand what is the correct finger that the groom places the ring on the bride's hand, which was different than anything they had known. They had so many questions about the clothing that they were called upon to wear, the payas that they were wearing if they were playing a Jewish part. I really used to enjoy these moments. And these past weeks, while visiting my daughter's family in New Jersey, they came to mind. Living in Short Hills, their family lives near the Paper Mill Playhouse. This is a professional theater, and being close to New York, the cast is made up of actors that are between Broadway and travel experiences. This past Saturday night, I was privileged to enjoy a wonderful performance of Fiddler on the Roof, more sophisticated than the teenagers on stage, although the high school performance with the exuberance of those kids was wonderful. Fiddler on the Roof, no matter the cast, no matter the moment, teaches lessons that are relevant to every Jewish life experience. A few years ago, Susan and I enjoyed the all-Yiddish performance of Fiddler on Broadway. If it ever comes back, you must go and see it. Now, understand that neither of us speak Yiddish, but you don't need the language as you share in the experience of the actors. In Yiddish, the language that Tevye and his community had been speaking, it felt so incredibly authentic. At the Paper Mill Playhouse, I watched Fiddler relating every moment to the experiences that the Jewish community is living through today. It was touching. It was emotional. It was incredibly relevant. This is why Fiddler on the Roof has been on stages all over the world. It is a Jewish story, but it's a universal story. One example, since its debut in Tokyo in 1967, it has been produced in Japan hundreds of times. The late librettist Joe Stein loved to tell about a producer there who asked how Americans could understand a story that was so Japanese. This past Saturday evening, Fiddler on the Roof, a musical based on a series of Yiddish short stories written by Shalom Aleichem, brought me to tears. Once again, a few of the themes: the challenge to the authority of Tevye, the Papa. His three eldest daughters of 5 are choosing their own partners. The traditional role of the Papa, working with a matchmaker, undermined as love enters the scene. Anatevka is their humble home. There's a constant tension and confrontation between the Jewish and non-Jewish community. This is the story of so many of our grandparents who came to this country to build a foundation upon which so many of us have found success. In Anatevka, anti-Semitism is a way of life. With the rabbi's prayer, may God keep the czar far away from us. A reminder of the power of hatred when unleashed and encouraged by those in power. It was incredibly painful to be watching Fiddler at a moment when anti-Semitism is visible at home and around the world. The Tsar and his minions did not hide their hatred of the Jew. We're hearing today from the anti-Semites on the college campus, high schools, workplaces, and on our streets, an ancient hatred spoken once again aloud. In the theater on Saturday evening, I sat next to a young girl who was about 6 years old. I was really surprised that her family brought her to the show, but she was enchanting. She was bright, and sitting next to her, you could feel how she was completely engaged in the story. Her parents had prepared her like the students had been prepared for my East Side High School class many years ago, with this little girl beside me, and my grandsons a couple of seats over. I became overwhelmed by thoughts, and they just hit me, of our hostages in Gaza. Jews were being beaten on stage in the midst of a wedding celebration. Jews being beaten and shot and tortured during a concert, torn from their homes and murdered. How could there be pogroms again? How could our people live through such a moment? The Jews of Anatevka lived for years in their humble and invisible community. It was their home. The representative of the Tsar announces to Tevye and his friends that they have 3 days to pack and to leave. 3 days to take everything out of their homes, knowing that they will be leaving behind everything that they really treasured, the relationships built, years of interaction with their friends. As family members were being called upon to split, to go to distant lands, how often have our people heard these words in every language around the world? Soon to be strangers in a strange new place. We must not forget that the Jewish people until 1948 were without a land to call their own. They were like fiddlers on the roof, strengthened and guided by traditions, but never feeling truly secure. I don't know how many more times I will be privileged to sit in a theater and enjoy a performance of Fiddler. At this point in my life, I qualify as a seasoned rabbi, perhaps overly seasoned. I cannot begin to imagine what my grandparents felt, what our people, what other refugees are experienced when faced with expulsion from a land or seeking to find a new place that will afford them safety and security. Most of us who are sitting here today or watching have lived our lives in the land that we believe is the home of the free and the brave. But we know it is critical to work to create a nation, our nation, where Jews and all others can live together in peace and with respect. The anti-Semitism of Fiddler, although visible, center stage once again, must not, and I believe will not remain. Perhaps if we live long enough for the Messianic age, anti-Semitism will truly disappear, as will racism, and so much more that brings pain. The Jewish people, we are a strong and resilient people. We know how to survive, and in every land, once established, we have learned how to thrive. In America, we are beginning once again to discover who are our true allies. But there is a unique, different Jewish experience today, because today we are blessed with the state of Israel, a modern, still unfolding miracle, a homeland where Jews fleeing from lands have found peace and security, even though we are watching war unfold. We do not live in Anatevka. There is no czar. We are blessed to be in America. And I ask you to join in the pledge to work to assure that the future for our children, our grandchildren, in this land will be safe and secure. And beyond that, that is just the beginning, the foundational work that we must do. Because our responsibility is to pass on to them the beauty of our history and of our traditions. So tonight, as we remember the residents of Anatevka, thinking of the chairs that are draped to my left, to your right, thinking of our hostages, we pledge l'chaim, to life. Listening now to one of the beautiful, touching songs from Fiddler, the Sabbath prayer, our prayer that God will bless our people, that God will bless our country, that we will see peace in Israel, a peace that will endure. Shabbat Shalom.